of the rim. Got it! Oh, the slam. Oh, using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry!
Back in 2016, when Kevin Durant made the infamous transfer to Golden State, Lil B tweeted he had lifted the KD curse placed upon him about 5 years prior. However, as you'll see in this video, I think he'd lost control of it. As 7 years have now passed, maybe it isn't even Lil B, but the basketball gods absolutely hate Kevin Durant. This is highlighted in a number of events that span past a decade now. Fly with me for a sec. All the way back to 2013, when the front office traded James Harden directly after their first finals appearance. This had nothing to do with Durant's inexplicable misfortune though. The Thunder chose that move all by themselves. Either way, because Harden was now donning a different jersey, there was nobody left to pick up the slack when Russell Westbrook went down with a knee injury in the first round of the playoffs. In my mind, I'm imagining a world where this still happens, only now James is able to be the primary ball handler in the starting lineup with just KD for the remainder of that run. Boy, they might have really unlocked something and history could look totally different. Back in reality, OKC's run for the year was over almost immediately, as although they advanced through the first round in 6 games, it was quite obvious they had zero real shot at repeating as conference champions or winning a title without Russ. Not all bad though. Since it was just a meniscus injury, he wasn't gonna be completely held out of the next season or anything. As a matter of fact, considering his playstyle, he recovered quite miraculously from his first ever significant knee injury. Health permitting, the Thunder would go on to scale the West once again, landing in a conference finals rematch with the now reigning West champion Spurs. Shortly before Game 1, however, it was announced that Serge Ibaka would miss the rest of the playoffs with a calf injury, right after they'd advanced in a thriller over the Lob City Clippers. The news meaning OKC was now to take on the considerably hungry and revenge-driven 2014 Spurs without their best shot blocker, rebounder, and third leading scorer. Predictably, they were ransacked in the first 2 games, only for Ibaka to randomly return as they were already down 0-2, helping them tie the series. I've always argued they possibly never fall into this deficit in the first place had Serge not been so unfortunate. Can't prove it, yet this was now the second straight playoff run that was affected in some way by the loss of a crucial teammate. San Antonio claimed victory in 6, sending the Thunder to their 3rd consecutive season of trying to climb the mountain. Durant himself would reveal in a 2014 documentary that in preparation for the upcoming season, he resigned from Team USA after Paul George's devastating leg injury, citing reasons such as fatigue, but also admittedly being psyched out by the event. What if he went on to suffer a similar fate? After all, the PG injury quite literally ended that Indiana Pacers core run. Despite the effort, in a very sick twist of irony, he would still end up missing time to start the 2015 campaign, recovering from a Jones fracture in his foot, costing 17 games total. Desperate to finally realize his team's true potential, he struggled through more complications on the way to March, where it was determined there was no path forward. After just 27 games, the fracture was showing signs of regression, requiring bone graft surgery and 4 to 6 months of missed time. At this point, in yet another sick twist of irony, the basketball gods had anointed a new young team in the West, Golden State, who were already NBA champions in the same season that anyone had begun to take them seriously. Contrast this with the Thunder, who people had now had an eye on since around 2010 or 11. After a brief appearance in the finals, which caused everyone to believe they'd be back immediately and for the foreseeable future, all they had to show for were 3 straight runs thwarted by injury. To make matters worse, Durant's contract decision was looming on the horizon, providing the option to find a new team in the summer of 2016 if necessary. Surely there would be no need for this, however. They were an incredible unit when all on the floor, and their bad luck had to run out at some point. Did they possess the capability to match the Warriors though? Many thought it possible, especially whilst looking for any way to discredit their championship run, quipping that 2015 was just far too easy. Amongst the Spurs and Clippers, the world especially needed to see them top KD and Westbrook, who had been the original torchbearers in the West. Luckily, this event would come to fruition in the Western Conference Finals after Curry repeated as MVP unanimously, whilst his team placed their flag atop the regular season mountain, going 73-9. Perhaps KD's unit stood no chance. Perhaps toppling history's best team on the way to a title would be the storybook ending to what had been an agonizing 4-year span. NBA history brushed shoulders with this reality, watching the blue and orange take a commanding 3-1 lead out of nowhere, outclassing the Bay Area in every way possible. They were taking delight in it too. You could see in press conferences this meant something to them. It just all fell apart after that. Specifically with Durant underperforming and being unable to lead his squad to close it out even once in 3 tries. No injuries or basketball gods to blame this time really, just an inexplicably unfortunate event to suffer given how close he'd come to greatness. The horror did not stop there though, with the Slim Reaper doubling down on the poor optics just a few months later, joining that very Warriors core to seemingly force his way to a title. This almost as if to say, fine, if my team is always going to be injured at just the right time, if there's always going to end up being somebody better, then I'll just pad my luck against either of those factors. The idea wasn't wrong either. With this new hyper team, as long as he and Steph were playing, there really wouldn't be much to worry about in the coming years. They almost had to worry about that the very first year. In February of 2017, Zaza Pachulia would fall backwards into Kevin Durant's legs, starting a very uncanny trend of this exact type of injury throughout the rest of his career. For now though, it was feared this ailment was serious and could cost a significant amount of time. Remind you that Golden State had paid a significant roster price for adding him in free agency. They could still win games without him, but how about winning a title using this supporting cast if he couldn't return? Would Durant's first ring coming without him even playing be worse than winning with the Warriors was slated to be? Fortunately, after 19 games, he would return and propel the team to history's most dominant playoff run just as expected. Yet, I've never forgotten how the basketball gods were lurking in the background, just reminding us how much they love to target him in any given year. 2018 would see a fairly dramaless repeat, save for the fact that Iguodala missed 4 games of the Rocket series that they very nearly lost, which I always thought was more significant than anyone gave it credit for. In any case, they were now potentially breezing to a three-peat, which hadn't been done since the early 2000s, no matter how many stars teamed up. My read on the situation had always been that yes, nobody would ever respect Durant's Warriors rings given how ridiculously OP they were. However, if they could go on to just stack domination to the likes of which we'd never seen, then maybe no one would have a choice. Something like a 4-peat, 5 titles in 6 seasons, just utter domination. Headed in that direction here, I will stand by the fact they were good and on their way to a 3-peat in 2019 until the powers that be decided they'd seen enough. He was granted a warning shot in the second round with that calf injury versus Houston, followed by him nobly trying to save his flailing team from a 3-1 deficit when it became clear they could not beat the Raptors without him. Could you imagine how well it would have played over for Durant to come back in Game 5, all to end up willing them to a series win in 7? Yeah, a little too well. Overseers weren't going for that. The Achilles injury would strike almost immediately, but the Warriors would not get the opportunity to win one without him either, which would have only added to the poor optics at that point in time. How would the world have handled a 3rd ring he didn't even get to play for? On top of the 2 that were already so frowned upon? His own teammate was apparently frowning upon him, as the world saw earlier in the season, leading Durant to pack it up and make the transfer to Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving. Although by default there would be no action between the two for at least a year given the timing of his injury. In theory, winning a title or multiple titles with the Nets would be legacy redeeming, wiping away the sins of the last few seasons which violently disturbed the power balance of the league. Of course, that was before the deal which yielded James Harden came about. Reunited after nearly a decade, KD was now one piece of what was likely to be the most offensively talented trio of all time. To make matters worse, Brooklyn would follow the script of past super teams by signing stars who'd long passed their prime, yet could still likely provide in a lineup next to 3 stars of this caliber. It didn't matter that LaMarcus Aldridge was washed. If all he had to do was make wide open mid-range shots on a unit this talented, how was it not an advantage? If Blake Griffin just had to roll to an open basket while the D focused on those 3, how was it fair? Logic be damned, seeing these faces together caused a frenzy because, as I always say, everything in life is optics. And seeing this team 2 years after this team, it was simply a pattern for Durant now. With the makeover, would a Nets championship even be respected? Well, we never got close to needing to have these conversations because those 3 couldn't play games together if their seasons depended on it. Unfortunately, their seasons depended on it. Skipping a bit ahead in the story here, the trio played 16 total games together in 2 seasons, winning 13 of them by the way. If that does not just scream divine intervention. One guy would be injured, it'd look as if they were about to finally put it together, then another guy would instantly go out for any reason. When they finally did get to the playoffs, the roster had dwindled all the way down to KD himself having to take on the eventual NBA champion Bucks, and very nearly eliminating them. Also, I do mean dwindled. Kyrie's ankle, Harden's hamstring, even LaMarcus had been forced into retirement. Not just some unfortunate injury, their random support signing had to retire after an entire career of showing no signs this would ever be a thing. Even with this ridiculous number of detours and yet another sick twist of irony, if his foot had just been behind that line, I can't even accurately paint the picture of what the NBA would look like today. Truly one of those time traveler moves a chair moments. It was fine though. 2021 was a devastatingly weird year for a lot of organizations, and surely a full campaign of gelling after a proper training camp would settle matters promptly. Except none of that would happen. Kyrie would go on his hiatus over the vaccine in an extremely weird saga where he would only be a part-time player given New York's COVID rules. Nobody could explain how that was supposed to work from the jump, prompting Nets management to choose not to deal with him at all until he could truly be a part of the team. This being the decision, James Harden was left in a situation where he was trying to recover from injury, whilst also being asked to pick up the slack for his other star guard he expected to be there, especially with the roster being a bit thin to accommodate a supposed super team. The Beard would quickly become disgruntled as this hadn't at all been what he signed up for. So before anybody could blink, the latest trio experiment had disbanded. By the way, this was only around a month after Bruce Brown had been pushed into the legs of Kevin Durant, marking the second time this injury coincidentally happened. In the Harden deal, given that the front office still had two star players to work with, a salvage job would take place where Brooklyn could still be able to contend with a little luck. Here's the thing, nothing surrounding Ben Simmons has been lucky for a few years now, or KD for that matter. When healthy, he was a top defender in the association, and theoretically could be a fit next to the two stars offensively. Simmons himself eventually saying things were going to be scary when they hit the court. That sounded familiar. They did not hit the court. He saw no time with the unit, the roster was horribly undermanned for a championship run, leading to the Nets being ousted in the first round with little to no spectacle. This also marked what was probably the toughest playoff series of Durant's career. There existed the possibility that this duo could still eventually put it all together though, being sent back to square one where it was only them and a decent roster. A respected title one day even. The issue became contract talks were on the horizon, with the last 3 seasons having objectively been a disaster. It just didn't feel like any major wins were soon to come. Of course they weren't. For the third time in 5 years, Durant's legs were a magnet as Jimmy Butler would fall back first into his knee, smack dab in the middle of Brooklyn's most encouraging stint of basketball in years. Kyrie would now be tasked with holding down the fort until KD's return, in which he almost immediately responded with a trade request. The sudden shift in energy caught many off guard given the worst of the relationship had seemed to be in the past. It was no matter though. He'd made a flat-out demand, and given his contract situation, he had decent leverage. Even without that, the franchise was likely done dealing with the drama. Kyrie found himself in Dallas, with the obvious next domino being where Durant was headed because there was zero chance he'd be spending his older age leading a cast of randoms absolutely nowhere. Remind you, in a show of good faith to both Harden and Kyrie, he had signed an extension some time ago. Thus, a move that had been guaranteed to grant him more titles had now become one of NBA history's most perplexing team eras ever. The new Super Friends alliance with Devin Booker, CP3 and Aiden looked just as bad on paper as nearly everything else he'd done in recent memory. Of course, I believe this is about the time the masses went on to learn who DeAndre Ayton actually was. In any case, this had no bearing on the bigger picture due to the Overlord stalking Durant's every career move. By this point, the fandom had learned to be overly cautious with these teams. They might look good, still, let them play at least 10 consecutive games together, maybe before panicking and complaining that the league is ruined forever. Right on cue, Slenderman would play 8 total regular season games with Phoenix, mirrored by a random slip in pregame that led to an ankle injury. There's just absolutely no way. With that little bit of playtime to learn a new group, it appeared fairly clear there would be no championship this soon. The roster didn't have the depth, Chris Paul had lost quite a bit since 2021, and he would go down with injury in the Nuggets series anyways because he's been dealing with his own curse dating back to the Clippers days. It was okay though, Durant would get a full campaign with his new team for 2024 and a training camp. Not to mention the front office moved quickly in nabbing available improvements, clamping down on Bradley Beal and many other support pieces throughout the summer. Would you look at that? Another big 3. To be honest, I don't think anything that's happening in the present day is a surprise, because instead of spending the summer crying about how unfair one of Durant's new super teams were, we spent it saying, I need to see them prove it. NBA fans have simply become privy to the script. Something always happens to his teams, without fail. So the 2024 season commences, and all of a sudden, Beal's got a back problem, with a clip surfacing of him in shoot-around looking like he needed to be on a massage table and very, very far away from a basketball court. But wait, there's more. Now Devin Booker has an ankle/calf problem where he's in and out, so when this campaign's torches are lit, Durant is essentially playing by himself after all that excitement of what looked like a three-headed monster. But wait, there's more. He hasn't gotten hurt yet. Bradley Beal plays a few games, although he appears to be laboring, and now Devin Booker has been set to return. The debut of the Suns' Big Three is imminent. You'd be a fool to have believed that though. Per the latest report, Bradley Beal will miss no less than 3 weeks dealing with his newfound back issues, where he'll then be reevaluated. There's an argument to be made Brad has dealt with something in many recent seasons causing him to miss time. So maybe it's not all some conspiracy, the basketball gods aren't at KD's neck, he just plays with injury vulnerable teammates. The larger point is this just looks uncanny in comparison to his recent teams. The basketball gods hate him. And as you now see, the plot goes back further than the crime of joining the 73-9 Warriors. Wherever success is to be had and expected, failure is to be snatched. A lot of the time, not due to anything he controls. I'd already been skeptical of his new team at its inception, and now I know why. Hopefully it comes together. There's no doubt the three could be wildly entertaining and even contend. There would also just be no surprise if we quite literally never see these three play a game together. That's just the way things have gone for Durantula over the years.